Final award tonight is Trial Lawyer of the Year, and Andre LaRose is going to present that award.
Hi everyone, I know it's getting late, so I'll try to make this short. And to follow up on what Mike said, this year's award goes to 2 trial lawyers who fight like hell and to do the right thing. And I admire both of them. I only know one of them, but I've done a little intel on the second one, so that I could have a little something to say. First of all, I want to just tell you a little bit about the case that led to this award. The Creutzfelds, a couple in their late 60s who live in Miles City. Butch was an attorney in Miles City. Julie's a therapist. She actually was an expert in a case of mine. I just put 2 and 2 together a couple of weeks ago. She and her husband, they decided to develop some land into a subdivision. They negotiated with Pinnacle Bank. They got a loan, or were approved for a loan of $5 million. The bank approved the plans, Billings City Council approved the preliminary plat, everything was a go. They borrowed $3.6 million up to $5 million. And then all of a sudden, Pinnacle Bank changed their mind and gave them 10 days notice and said, you need to pay back that $3.6 million. And they weren't behind on any payments. They had put some of their own money on the line to deal with neighbors' complaints that they didn't have to deal with because things were approved, but they still did it. And after all that, Pinnacle Bank still pulled the rug out from under them. And so these 2 lawyers who had practiced together before and done many, many cases together before took them to trial. They ended up having to go to the Supreme Court on an issue where one of the attorneys they'd hired, who was hired to give tax advice, then went to work for the defense law firm and wouldn't recuse himself, or the firm would not disqualify itself. So it's a long road, as many of you know, in these trials. Sometimes you end up having to try the case a couple times before you get your victory, and these 2 lawyers did get a victory. They got not only $2.2 million, I believe, I forget exactly, but over $2 million for actual damages, and then $2.3 million for emotional distress. Because as one of the lawyers said so eloquently, this was a couple in their late 60s who were facing financial ruin at a time in their lives when they could not recoup that loss. And those 2 lawyers are Don Harris and Steve Harman. So I want to tell you a couple things the Creutzfelds said about Don and Steve. So this is from Butch and Julie. Don Harris, the best cross-examiner and deposition taker I have ever seen. And Butch knows because he was a practicing lawyer. Don has a velvet glove voice with a brass knuckle mind, and he gets the facts and knows the law. And he's also excellent in determining the theory of the case and driving home the key points. Steve Harman, a quick study who made a great contribution into lambasting the dark side at trial. Think Voldemort. See, I'm going to update this a little bit from Dorothy and Oz to, let's talk Harry Potter, okay? Anyway, and Steve understands what works with the jury and is very innovative in presenting closing arguments. Julie and Butch say, I heartily endorse both of you as great trial lawyers. Thank you again. That's from the Creutzfelds. Steve, I found out from doing a few inquiries, well, both of them not only have a long history of substantial jury verdicts, always fighting for the little person, for the individual against the corporations, but They're also both mentors and teachers. They give their time to the community. Steve, I found out, went down to help with reconstruction after Hurricane Katrina on 3 different occasions. Being a New Orleans bred girl, thank you, Steve. I appreciate that. Many of my family lost their homes in Katrina, and I think it's wonderful that you give of your time to do that. It shows, I think, that both Steve and Don hold people beyond the law. That they give their hearts to the law, but they give it to so many people in so many ways. And he's Claudia, who has worked with Steve for 32 years, who says she grew up with him, basically, said her description of him is, he's swell. So, and she had a lot more to say than that, but basically a great guy with a great sense of humor, a sense of civility and integrity. He's always respectful to other attorneys, doesn't take himself too seriously, has a good sense of humor, and a wonderful family man. Wife Joni, 3 kids, and that he's just a well-rounded person. And if you want to see all the honors and awards that he's received, you can go to his website. But there are many, including Best Lawyers, American Board of Trial Advocates, all kinds of things. Same with Don Harris. Best Lawyers, Super Lawyers, National Board of Trial Advocacy. He's certified trial advocate. And both have the AV rating. Don, too, is a very dedicated family man with his wife Cheryl and 3 children, one of whom just got back from being deployed, and which I know had to have been nerve-wracking to have a child in harm's way like that. So Don I've known ever since he got involved in a case when I worked at Disability Rights Montana, and he helped out on that case, and he won an award from Disability Rights Montana for that work. And that's part of what I've always admired about Don, is he has the heart to get in and fight for people who really often don't have a voice. I would say, second, people of different sexual orientation or people with disabilities. We still segregate people with disabilities in institutions. And one of the cases that I most admire Justice Nelson for is the KGF decision, in which he really said, when you take away people's right, you segregate them in an institution and say they can't live in society with the rest of us, you have to go through some due process to do it, and you have to have effective advocates fighting for your rights. And Don has always seen that, and he tells me again and again that discrimination, and especially disability discrimination, is an affront to personal dignity, to human dignity. And Don lives that, he breathes that, and he fights for that dignity. So to both of you, I admire your work, I nominated you, and I'm so happy that you were being honored with this award.
Occasionally people ask me why, all the things that you do want to be a trial lawyer. I tell them, it keeps me regular.
Well, now you can see what I've been dealing with for years in the courtroom. I'm going to get right to it. A lot of people to thank. I want to thank my primary jury consultant, my lovely wife Cheryl, who, if she doesn't give me a thumbs up on the case, they don't go to trial. And I know that Joni fulfills the same role for Steve as well, because when we have our jury focus groups, Cheryl and Joni come. And after the jurors leave and we talk with them, then we sit down with Cheryl and Joni and figure out what the heck we got to do. And they've never been wrong. No, not once. I want to thank Steve. It's been an honor. We've tried enough of these cases together. And it's always fun to practice with and be in the courtroom with another great trial lawyer, especially one that's a little bit nuts. And Harman is a little bit nuts. Let me tell you why. He has this saying. His saying is that in rebuttal, you always got to use a prop. Always got to have a prop in rebuttal. And normally in these cases, I would do the closing, first part of closing, and Steve would do the rebuttal. But Steve is extraordinarily superstitious. He won't tell you what the prop is. He won't tell me, co-counsel, what the theme is. So I'm sitting there in the Crutchfield trial, and it's been a long slog. And Max Davis is on the other side. He's been doing a good job. And he's doing his closing. And actually, Steve gave part of the closing, I gave part of the closing, and then Max gets up. And about midway through Max's closing, Harman gets a styrofoam cup. And he starts tearing it apart with his thumbs. Remember that? Yeah. He starts tearing it apart and it's loud. And I'm thinking, uh-oh. Is it I don't want the jury to think that Max is saying anything important. And I look at the jury, they don't seem to be too alarmed about it. And just as Max finishes, I don't know how he timed it, he finishes his closing, Harman has gotten through the cup. He cuts it in half with his thumbnails. He flings one half back, and what Max ended with was, there is no liability in this case. But if you're feeling sorry for the Crutchfield, I suggest that you give him something. $10, he says. $10. Well, Harman takes off the top of the cup, throws it on the table, stands up, walks out there, and he's got a full cup, a whole cup, and about a third of kind of a ratty-eaten cup. And he tells the jurors, he says, well, we've been over liability. I'm not going to talk about that anymore. But we are going to talk about damages. And you got a choice in this case. You can either give the Crutchfields a full cup of justice, or you can give him this. And he takes it over and sets it on the bar, the jury bar, and sits down. It was brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant. And he made the prop right there. And how he knew to this day that Max Davis was going to say $10, I have no idea. But he did. And it worked great. Just a couple other things, if I might. There has been sometimes at these events, we're very keen to talk about the challenges that we have. We're very keen to talk about the dark side and all of the shenanigans they're up to with their money and all the rest of it. And I don't disparage that at all. But I want to share with you tonight, before I sit down, at least what I think our vision of the MTLA is, and why I think we're going to continue to kick their asses. And I want to give you a quote that I paraphrase that I think sums it up. And the quote goes like this. The quote is, we are watchers. All of us watchers. We are responsible for watching over one another, for guarding against the darkness. And what is the darkness? Well, the darkness is injustice. And the causes of injustice aren't new, they're old, and they're three. privilege, its prejudice, and its power. But thank God, there are three antidotes that are more powerful than this claptrap. What is defying injustice on a daily basis are human dignity, equality, and responsibility. Because it's from these three things that we have just laws. It's for these forces that people fight and sacrifice. And I believe in my heart and my soul, as many of you do, that there is nothing that can defeat good people fighting for a noble cause. Now we're all here, all of us in this room, because we have decided to guard against this darkness. And how do we do that? Well, we do it for simple things. We share ideas, we come together, we help one another, and we support each other. We support individuals for political and judicial office who will fight for just laws and against unjust laws and protect fundamental human rights, as Justice Nelson has done so brilliantly. And we accomplish this by representing those who need our help and who deserve our help. And when we accomplish these things, when we come together to do these, each as we can, nobody can do it all, but each as we can, then we become more than ourselves, and we become transcendent, and we become a force. And this organization is a force. If you look at the people who have been recognized tonight, Steve and I may be exceptions, but there is in this room and in this organization a collection of courage and brilliance and concern and compassion that is carrying the day. If you go back and look at consumer rights in this country 40 and 50 years ago, and you look at them today, there has been a tremendous transformation in human rights, consumer rights, and we're going to have setbacks. We're not going to win them all, but who cares? Because we're in it, and we're in it for the long haul. And I'm absolutely convinced that when we come together and we become a force, then this force, this strength of human dignity, becomes more and will prevail over the callousness of privilege. That the bonds of equality will always be stronger than the cruelty of prejudice. And that the self-sacrifice of responsibility, which is the bedrock of responsibility, will be always more powerful than the arrogance of power. As members of the MTLA, we are not going to go quietly into any darkness at any time. We aren't going to quit, and we are not going to be intimidated by privilege, by prejudice, or by power. We are watchers. We're going to watch over our clients. We're going to watch over one another. And we're going to watch over the law. And together, as generations of lawyers have done before us, we are going to guard against the darkness.
He's really good, isn't he? I want to just tell you one thing about how good he is. We're deep into the fourth or fifth day of trial on a case against Guy Rogers involving a uninsured motorist claim, and we have to prove up our damages before we can appeal. And this is the first case I tried with Don. And Gary Bickler was the representative from Great Falls for Farmers Union Mutual Insurance Company. And I had represented Gary in the past, I knew him. And about the fourth day of trial, Don was relaxed enough to walk over to Gary, and I thought, well, this will be interesting. Don said, well, so how long have you been the bailiff? That's what I had to work with. Thank you for the award. Thank you to my mock juror of one, my wife of 26 years, who sat on this. Thank all of you.